I was standing outside my son's house, holding a peach pie I had baked myself. I didn't get a hello from anyone. It was my 70th birthday. My son, Michael, and his wife, Jessica, didn't seem to notice me. Jessica told me to wait in the basement. I didn't cry or yell. I just left. A month later, they lost their home, business, and marriage. All of this happened because of how they treated me. My name is Evelyn Carpenter. I'm 70 years old. The day this all started, I was holding a peach pie. I had baked it myself. Jessica, my daughter-in-law, always complains about pies from the store. I was standing outside my son's house in a town called Glendale, California. No one had come outside to say hello. It was my birthday, my 70th. I had parked my car across the street. The driveway was full of big, dark cars and shiny sedans. I didn't mind the short walk. I told myself that the gold and white balloons on the mailbox were big and expensive. They were not like the cheap ones I used to blow up myself. Back then, birthdays meant homemade decorations and chocolate cakes. I walked to the front door slowly. I was careful not to drop the pie. My hands were shaking a little. This was partly because of my old joints. It was also because I didn't know what kind of mood Jessica would be in. She always had a big smile for her social media and a sigh for me. I hadn't seen my son, Michael, in 3 weeks. I hadn't talked to him since he sent me a text message inviting me to the party. The message was short and cold. It said, "Party starts at 5. Dress nice." So I wore my best pants, and the blue shirt that a friend from church said made my eyes look nice. I even curled my hair. I also wore the small gold necklace my husband, Frank, had given me a long time ago. He gave it to me on our 30th wedding anniversary. When I knocked on the door, it was not Michael who opened it. It was Jessica. She was wearing a shiny silver dress. She had a lot of makeup on and was holding a drink. She looked like a person from a magazine. She didn't smile at me. She looked surprised, like I shouldn't have been there. "Oh, you're here early?" she said. She looked behind her. "Guests are still coming, and the photographer is getting ready." She pointed inside. I walked into the hallway. I saw many strangers in fancy clothes. They were holding glasses of bubbly wine. I walked past a table full of food I did not know. The food was on small sticks. There was also shrimp that I knew cost more than all my food for a month. I opened my mouth to ask where Michael was, or the kids, but Jessica turned. She said, "Could you just wait in the basement for a bit? We're trying to keep the upstairs neat. The basement is quiet. There's a folding chair down there, I think." I just stared at her. She was already walking away. I looked down the stairs. It was dark down there. I saw baskets of dirty clothes and cold, gray concrete. I felt a tight feeling in my chest. I wanted to ask her if this was a joke. I wanted to see if anyone would notice me. But no one looked at me. Not one person turned their head. So I carried my pie down into the basement. I sat on a chair next to a clothes rack. I waited. Loud music played from upstairs. I heard people laughing. Then I heard my name, Jessica's voice. She said, "She still brings that same pie every year, bless her heart." Everyone laughed. I sat there, staring at the shiny paper over my pie. I knew that I was not a part of that, everyone, anymore. I stood up. I opened my bag and took out a paper napkin. I wrote a short message on it. It was the only thing I could think of. "Thanks for the basement. I raised this family in mine." I put the napkin on top of the pie. I left the gift I had for my grandson on the clothes dryer. I walked out the back door without saying another word. No one stopped me. No one even saw me leave. I didn't cry on the way home. Not even one tear. I just looked at the red traffic lights and the tall trees. They became blurry outside my car window. The radio was on low. A talk show about houses was playing. I wasn't even listening. The whole way back to my small apartment, I kept seeing that napkin. It was sitting on top of my pie. I wondered if anyone would even read it before they threw the whole thing in the trash. When I drove into the parking lot of my building, I didn't go inside right away. I sat in my car for a little while longer. The headlights were off. I watched a group of teenagers across the lot. They were taking pictures of themselves in front of a new, nice car. They were laughing like life had never been hard for them. I used to laugh like that, too. Frank, my husband, and I would dance in the kitchen when no one was looking. That was back when Michael was a boy in school. He used to think I was the smartest, kindest person in the world. I sat there until the car lights turned off. Then I grabbed my bag and walked inside. The place smelled like old carpet and lemon soap. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't even take off my shoes. I just stood in the middle of my living room. I stared at a picture on the wall. It was a picture of all of us at Michael's wedding. This was before Jessica changed her hair color. It was before she started fixing my words in front of other people. It was before I started to feel small and invisible at every family event. I wanted to call someone. Not Michael. Not my sister. She would have just told me I was making a big deal out of nothing. I thought about calling my friends from church, but it was Saturday night. I didn't want them to feel sorry for me. So I made tea. That is what I do when I don't know what else to do. I boiled water. I sat at my kitchen table. I held the warm mug close to my chest. At around 10 o'clock, my phone buzzed. It was a message from a home security app. I had helped Michael set it up last year when they were worried about people stealing things from their porch. I never deleted the app. I opened it. On the screen, in a black and white view, I saw the side of their house lit up by the porch lights. I saw people walking out, laughing. I saw Jessica's mother hugging everyone like she was the queen. My pie was still on the clothes dryer. The message wasn't from them. They hadn't called. No one had sent a text message. Not even my grandson. That's when I understood something. It wasn't a feeling of being sad or mad. It was just a clear, empty thought. I didn't matter in that house. I could disappear, and they would still eat fancy food and post pictures and toast their glasses. It would be like nothing had changed. At around midnight, there was a knock on my door. It was a lady named Mrs. Green from the apartment next to mine. She saw my lights were still on. She said she had made too much chili. I told her I wasn't hungry, but she stayed anyway. She sat across from me in her house slippers and asked what was wrong. I told her the whole story, every single word, even the part about the napkin. She listened without stopping me. She just nodded slowly. Then she reached across the table and put her hand over mine. "You don't have to take that," she said. Her voice was soft but firm. "You're not invisible." I didn't answer her, but later, when I was in bed and looking at the ceiling, I thought about what she said. I wasn't invisible. I just needed to stop waiting for people who kept pretending they couldn't see me. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, not because I had something to do, but because I couldn't stop thinking about everything that happened the night before. I kept replaying it in my head. The look on Jessica's face when she opened the door. The sound of happy people from upstairs. The heavy feeling of silence when I left and no one came after me. Even though I tried to forget with a puzzle book and some breakfast, nothing could make the heavy feeling in my chest go away. So I decided to take my usual morning walk around the block to clear my head. I met my neighbor, Irene, on her way to get the mail. Right away, she said, "I saw Michael's party online. It looked like a wedding." Before I could even think of what to say, she took out her phone. She was smiling, as if she knew I would love to see it. I didn't have to fake a smile. My face just stayed still. She was looking at Jessica's social media page. The album was called The Party of the Year. It had 153 pictures. They were all taken by a professional photographer. There were little sparkly effects on everything. Jessica was posing in the front room with a glass of champagne. The kids were wearing the same kind of clothes. Michael was standing in front of a sign that said, "Happy 40th to our rock." And right there, in a picture, was the pie I made. It was sitting in a corner on a table behind the drinks. No one had touched it. It was not labeled like the other food. It was not even served. My stomach felt sick as Irene kept scrolling. She didn't see how still I had become. "And look at this one," she laughed. They even got a big family picture on the stairs, just like in a magazine. When I looked closer, I saw all of them. Jessica's mother was in the middle. She was smiling like she owned the house. Michael was standing next to her, with one hand on her shoulder. My grandchildren were smiling in the front. Jessica was holding a cake that I did not make. I was not in the picture, not even in the back. It was as if I had never been there. Then Irene accidentally moved to the next photo and stopped. "Oh," she said, touching the screen to make the picture bigger. "That's you, isn't it?" It was a blurry photo of me from the side. I was walking past the front window, holding the gift bag in one hand. My head was down. I had been cut out of the fun, cut out of my own family. I nodded and gave her back her phone. I told her I had to go. She didn't notice my voice was tight. When I got back inside, I sat down and looked at the wall for a long time. I was not sad. I was beyond being sad. It felt like I was being slowly erased. The worst part was not that they left me out. It was that no one thought I would care, like I was not worth a small lie or a fake reason. They just didn't think about me at all. I opened my laptop, not to check my emails or play games like I usually did. I opened it to log into an old account I hadn't used in years. It was one I kept just in case. I clicked through names until I found one I hadn't seen since Frank's funeral. The name was Olivia Sanders. She was not family. She was not even a friend. She was a lawyer. And she was about to remind me of who I used to be before I ever let that house make me feel small. Olivia answered on the second ring. The moment I heard her voice, it was calm and direct. There was no small talk. I felt 20 years younger. It felt like I had gone back to a time when I didn't wait for permission to be important. And before I could think twice, I told her exactly what had happened. I started with the party, the basement, the napkin, and ended with the pie still untouched on the table. She didn't stop me once. She just listened. Then she said, "I guess you're not calling just to complain." I told her no, I was not. I wanted to know what was left in the money fund that my Aunt Lillian had set up a long time ago. She had put my name on it after I stayed by her side for 6 months. Her own kids had left and didn't come back until the funeral. Olivia didn't have to look for long. She had the papers right there. She said something that made my chest feel tight for a second. "The fund became available 3 months ago. You have just over $2.1 million, Evelyn." I didn't say anything right away. I just sat there. The phone was warm against my ear. I looked at my TV screen, where I had paused an old movie an hour earlier. All I could think about was how I spent my last birthday. I was standing next to a washing machine and clothes dryer while other people drank expensive wine above my head. "Do you want to get the money?" Olivia asked, and I told her, no, not yet. I needed to think. I needed to decide what kind of person I was going to be now that I wasn't the woman people could push away and forget. I thanked her. I wrote the amount of money on a small sticky note. I looked at it for the rest of the day, not because I was surprised by the money. I had always thought Aunt Lillian had left me a good amount. I was looking at it because I realized how long I had been pretending I had no power, no choices. Just because it made things easier with Michael and Jessica, I wasn't poor, but I lived a small life on purpose. I was careful not to get in the way, not to shine brighter than anyone else, not to ask for much more than leftover food and invitations to holidays. And all this time, I could have changed everything. I could have moved. I could have traveled. I could have built a new life. But I didn't. I waited for small things. And now I was done waiting. That night, I did not make tea. I poured a glass of cheap wine from a box I kept in the back of my cabinet. I saved it for special nights I never let myself have. I sat on my small balcony and watched the lights from the busy road. I wasn't angry. I was clear. The next morning, I opened the security app again, not to secretly watch them, but to see who was coming and going. I watched the video from the party, the moment Jessica's mother arrived with a wrapped box. It was the same shape as the one I had brought. I watched Jessica smile and hug her like she was a queen. Then later in the video, I saw them move my pie. They took it off the food table completely. They put it on top of the washing machine in the garage, where it stayed. I skipped ahead to the family pictures. Someone laughed about how they finally got the light right. I didn't cry. I watched with a calm feeling I didn't know I had. It was like I was watching strangers. And maybe I was, because the people in that video were not my family anymore. Not really. They were actors in someone else's play. I was just a forgotten extra. Until now, I didn't touch the money right away. I didn't move any money. I didn't book a trip or buy anything. Because it wasn't about the money. It was about what the money meant. And more importantly, it was about what I was finally ready to do with it. So I waited for a few days, making a plan quietly. It wasn't for revenge. It was for something closer to getting what was right. A way to get a final answer that didn't involve yelling or loud noises. That is when I called Larry. He was my neighbor. He used to be a private investigator before he stopped working. He always fixed my leaking sink for free. He still read every legal paper like it was a puzzle. I asked him if he still knew people who could check on money, not to do anything against the law, just to check on something. Within a week, he told me what I already thought. Michael had put most of their money into a bad business deal. He did it through a friend of a friend who had already been looked at by the government. And worse, he had used Jessica's name on some of the papers. He probably did this to get around some rules. This meant that if the business failed, they would both get into trouble. And all of it was connected to a man named Curtis Wells. I had warned Michael about him 2 years ago. Curtis came to one of our family cookouts. He spent half the night talking about new money and secret business deals. I remember taking Michael aside that day and saying, he's not a businessman, he's a person who takes big risks. But Michael just rolled his eyes. He told me I didn't understand how the new money world worked. I guess that was true. I didn't understand how you could risk your family's future on a man's promises just to look rich on social media. But now, Larry said the government was looking at Curtis again. All I had to do was make sure the right papers got sent to the right person, without anyone knowing it was me, of course. That was easy enough. I put an envelope in a mailbox in a town a few streets over. It had copies of emails, money summaries, and screenshots. It also had a short typed note that said, "Check for fake signatures on money transfers." And then I waited. I didn't have to wait for long. 10 days later, Jessica posted a picture on her social media story of herself crying in her car. The words on the picture said, "Please pray for us." By the next day, Michael's company website was gone. All of her business partners had stopped working with her, and people started writing comments like fraud and Karma. For once, I didn't feel bad. I felt calm. I felt still. The next day, I went to the library. I printed out the picture I had taken of my pie with the napkin on it. I put it in a plain envelope and mailed it to their house. I didn't write a message. I didn't need to. They knew it was from me. That same night, Jessica's mom posted some words about being loyal to your family. This made me laugh. Because if being loyal meant eating cake while you sent the woman who raised your kids to wait with a mop and a water heater, then I wanted no part of that kind of family. I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea. My laptop was open. I watched their social media pages become quiet. The likes stopped. The quietness came over everything like dust. And it wasn't just satisfying. It was a clear sign that sometimes the only thing that works better than a yell is walking away without one. It was 2 weeks after their social media pages went quiet and the house went silent online. Jessica came to my door without telling me she was coming. Her makeup was runny. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She didn't knock like she was visiting family. She rang the bell 3 times very quickly. It was the sound of a person who desperately needed to be let in. When I opened the door, I saw she was holding the same expensive bag she showed off on social media last year. But it looked silly now. It was hanging on her arm while she wore a sweater with a hood and pajamas. There were no filters on her face. None at all. Before I could say anything, she started talking very quickly. She said, "I know you're probably still mad, and you have every right to be, but we're in real trouble, Evelyn." I didn't stop her. I didn't nod. I just moved aside and let her in without saying a word, because I wanted to see how far she would go before she asked for help. She walked straight into my kitchen, like it was still her house. She sat at the table as if I had asked her to. She started crying. She explained everything. How Michael's money was all frozen. How the kids had been taken out of their expensive programs after school. How her business partners had left her. How they had to sell one of their cars just to make the last payment on the house. And every few sentences she would say, "We didn't know," or "It wasn't personal." I let her talk until she couldn't talk anymore. I sat across from her with my hands folded in my lap. I was watching the same woman who once told me my food didn't fit their diet, now begging me for help. Finally, I asked, "What is it you're actually asking me for?" She looked down. It was the first time she had ever looked embarrassed since I had met her. She said, "We need help. With money. With feelings. I don't even know. Evelyn. Just something. Anything. I know I was wrong. I know we treated you like a piece of furniture. And I swear I didn't mean to be mean." Maybe she believed that. Maybe in her head, leaving me out on my own birthday was just a small choice she made because she was busy. Maybe she had convinced herself it wasn't done to hurt me. But to me, it didn't matter anymore. Because whether it was done on purpose or not, the hurt was the same. I stood up. I walked to the drawer next to the refrigerator. I took out a plain envelope I had prepared days earlier. I saw their problems coming online. I handed the envelope to her without saying a word. I watched her hands shake as she opened it. Inside was the napkin, the one I left on the pie at the party. It was flat and placed inside a clear plastic cover. It was like a memory she had tried to erase, but I would not let her. She looked at it for a long time. Then she finally looked up and said, Is this supposed to be a message?" I said, my voice calm and quiet, "No, Jessica, it's not a message. It's a reminder." She blinked. She looked at me like she didn't understand. And that's when I saw it. The moment she knew I wasn't going to give her anything, not money, not comfort, not forgiveness wrapped up in a check. And for the first time since she married my son, she looked like a person who knew what it felt like to be told no. Not because of anger, but because of respect for myself. She stood up slowly. She put the napkin back in the envelope. She said, "I don't know how we fix this." And I said, still holding the door open, "You can't fix something you never thought was broken until it cost you something." She left without another word. She was holding that envelope tightly. I locked the door behind her, not to be mean, but to have peace. 3 days after Jessica left, I was folding towels on my couch. My phone buzzed. It was a text message from a number I didn't know. The message was simple. It said, "Hi, Grandma. I'm sorry. I saw you leave that night. I didn't know what to do. When I saw the name at the top, Eli, my grandson, I had to sit down. Because after all the quiet I had from that house, this one small message hit me harder than I thought it would." I didn't reply right away. I just looked at the screen. My hand stopped moving. The towels fell off my lap. When I finally found the words, I wrote, "Thank you for saying that. Would you like to meet for a walk?" He answered in seconds. "Yes, please." We met the next day at the park near my apartment. It was right after school. He was wearing his sweater with a hood and his jeans. He was carrying his school bag, like it was very heavy. When he saw me, he came over quickly. He was a little shy at first. He was taller than I remembered. His voice was deeper. He said, "I wanted to say something that night, but I didn't know what was happening until you were gone. And then Mom said you just left because you weren't feeling well." I nodded. I let him talk. I could see in his eyes that he had been feeling bad for weeks, maybe even longer. Finally, he reached into his school bag. He pulled out the small gift bag I had brought to the party, the one with the blue ribbon I tied myself. He said, "I found this in the garage. It was pushed behind the cooler. I thought maybe you'd want it back." I took it from his hands slowly. My heart felt tight, not because of the gift, but because he had gone looking for it, because he had seen it, and he had decided it was important enough to bring back. I said, "You didn't have to do this." And he shook his head hard. "I wanted to," he said. I could tell this was not something Jessica had told him to do. This was all him. He was trying to make something right in a bad situation he didn't create. We sat on the bench for a while. We watched the dogs chase each other in the park. He finally asked, "Are you mad at us?" And I said, "I'm not mad at you. I never was." And he said, "Good. I don't want us to be like them." And that was the part that made my throat feel tight, because I saw what it cost him to say that, to admit that he saw the problems, too, that even at 15, he understood there was a difference between smiling in pictures and showing up when it was important. I told him, "You did something none of them did. You noticed. That matters." And he looked relieved, like he had been waiting to hear that since the night I left. When we stood up to go, I hugged him tightly. It was tighter than I had hugged him in years. I whispered, "No matter what happens, you'll always have a place with me." As he walked back to his mom's car, which was waiting at the edge of the parking lot, I saw Jessica inside. She was looking straight ahead, pretending not to see me. And for once, I didn't care, because that boy, her son, had just done what she could not. He made me feel seen again. The next time I saw Jessica, it wasn't planned, but I knew the knock on my door that Sunday afternoon was not from a neighbor, because it came with a forced patience that only a desperate person pretends to have. When I opened it, there she was again. This time, Michael was next to her. He was wearing a collared shirt, like he was going to church, but it was wrinkled and buttoned wrong at the top. Jessica had a plastic container in her hands. It was like she was offering me a peace gift. But the moment she saw the look on my face, she stopped. Then She pushed forward with that same voice she used when she had family dinners. It was bright and tight. She said, "We just wanted to talk. Just clear the air." I moved back and let them in, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see how far they would go, how much they would pretend. They sat down at my kitchen table, as if it was still their show, as if I was supposed to be happy that they finally remembered I existed. Jessica opened the container to show me lemon bars. This was her usual food for saying sorry. It was the same recipe she once said was too sour. I said nothing. I just sat across from them. I let them go through their planned speeches. Michael started saying things like, "We've been having a rough time lately, and we realized we could have handled things differently." I watched him closely. I saw how he avoided looking at me, how his leg was moving quickly under the table, how his voice broke, not from feeling bad, but from being uncomfortable. Then Jessica quickly started talking. She changed from being kind to being honest so fast, it almost seemed planned. She said, "Look, Evelyn, I know we've had problems, but this whole money thing, it's a big shock, and I don't think it's crazy to say we deserve a little of that. I mean, this family's success didn't happen by itself." The moment she said the word deserve, something in me turned off, because it was the first time she had completely shown her true self. The first time she said what she really came for. I didn't move. I didn't scold her. I didn't argue. I just reached under the table and pressed a button on a voice recorder. I had put it there before they arrived. Part of me knew this would happen. That one day she would say something that showed the truth. Jessica kept talking. She kept going deeper, not even realizing it. She said things like, "Michael built this life with your help? Sure. But we've kept it going. We've made it successful." And then she said the words that made everything clear. "You wouldn't even have that money if it wasn't for this family." And Michael didn't stop her. He didn't correct her. He just sat there, nodding his head. I said quietly, "Is that how you see it?" Jessica blinked, as if she suddenly understood she had gone too far. But it was too late. I stood up. I walked over to the counter. I picked up a big envelope I had prepared earlier, just in case. I handed it to Michael without explaining. Inside was a printed copy of every money transfer Michael had made using Jessica's name. They were the same papers I had sent to the government without a name on them. But this time, it had a small note on it that said, "You're welcome to read what's already public." They both looked at it as if it might blow up. And I said, "You don't need my money. You need a lawyer." Before either of them could say anything, I opened the front door and held it wide. Jessica stood up slowly. Her face was red. Her lips were tight. Michael just looked down at the envelope like a child who had been caught cheating on a test. As they walked out, Jessica turned to say something. But I didn't let her finish. I just said, "Don't worry. This time, you're not going to be cut out. You're the main picture now." I closed the door before they could answer. I turned off the recorder and sat down at my kitchen table alone. I was no longer waiting to be part of their family. I was finally proud that I had walked away before they burned everything down with me inside. The quiet after they left was not uncomfortable. It was a feeling I had earned. It felt like my house could finally breathe out. The tension was gone with them. I didn't feel like I had won. I didn't feel angry. I just felt calm in a way I hadn't felt in years. That night, I made myself a proper dinner. Baked chicken and cooked vegetables. Nothing fancy, but it was warm. It made my apartment smell like home. As I ate, I looked around my small place that used to feel lonely. I realized it had started to feel like mine again. Not just a place I was keeping for a while, waiting for visits or messages from Michael that made me feel bad. For the first time in a long time, I let myself plan something just for me. something simple but important. So I sent a few text messages to people who had been there for me in real ways. Mrs. Green from the apartment next to mine, Larry, my neighbor, Carol and Denise from my church book club, and of course, Eli, who answered right away with a, "Yes, I'll be there." By Sunday afternoon, I had my table set for 6 people. I had chairs from my neighbors that didn't match. I had cloth napkins I had made years ago but never used. I had a chicken cooking in the oven. It made my whole apartment smell like a holiday. When the doorbell rang, I opened it to see real smiles. The kind that make your eyes crinkle. The kind that don't need a camera. We sat around my tiny table. We ate and laughed and told stories. It wasn't a party. Not the kind that gets put online or has fancy pictures with filters. It was something better. Something real. When we finished eating, I stood up. I told Eli I had something for him. Everyone became quiet. I handed him an envelope. It was not fancy. It was just cream-colored. It had his name written on the front. He opened it slowly. He took out the papers. His eyes looked at the top line. It said, "College Savings Plan, all money paid." For a second, he didn't say anything. He just looked at me. Then he looked around the table, as if he needed someone else to tell him it was real. And I said, "This is for you, for noticing when others didn't, for remembering who baked the pie, and who left quietly." And he stood up. He hugged me hard, not the quick hug a teenager gives, but a real hug that made me close my eyes. And when he whispered, "Thank you, Grandma," I knew I had done the right thing. Because in that moment, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't forgotten. I was the head of the family again. Not of the family I raised, but of the one I built from nothing with people who saw me, who respected me, and who didn't ask me to sit in any basement. As the night ended, we played cards and ate leftover food. I realized I didn't need a big house or a fancy dining room to feel rich. I just needed people who clapped when I stood up to get more tea, who offered to help with the dishes, who asked for my pie recipe as if it was very special. As I watched Eli laugh with Denise over a card game, he clearly didn't understand. I felt a feeling settle in my chest. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you don't have to beg for a seat at someone else's table when you can build your own. It was a week after the dinner. Michael came to my door. He didn't call. He didn't warn me. He just knocked like a person who wasn't sure what kind of welcome he would get. I knew it was him before I even opened the door, because that knock was not fast or nervous. It was quiet. It was the knock of a man trying to pretend he wasn't about to ask for something he didn't earn. When I opened it, he stood there. He was holding nothing. His hands were in his pockets. His shoulders were low. It was as if he had practiced saying sorry, but forgot the words. He said, "Hi, Mom." I said nothing. I just waited. Finally, he added, "Can I come in?" I moved aside, not because I had gone soft, but because I needed to hear what he had to say, all of it without hiding behind a door. He walked in slowly. It was like the air in my house felt heavier than he remembered. He sat down at the same kitchen table where he used to eat cereal as a boy, but now he looked like a stranger in his own memory. I didn't sit across from him. I stayed standing. My arms were folded. I gave him space to talk. He said, "I know you're probably done with me, and maybe you should be, but I didn't come here to beg. I just needed to say, I'm sorry." I nodded once. I was still silent. He kept talking. His voice was more tense now. "Jessica is gone. She took the kids to her mom's place in Florida. The house is being sold. I'm renting a small apartment near the busy road. I lost everything. And it wasn't just the business. It was all of it. my marriage, my good name, my peace. I felt a small flicker of something. Sadness, maybe, not for him, but for the boy I once put to bed at night. The boy who used to bring me drawings of our house with a heart on it. He would write, "Me plus mom plus dad equals home," with a marker. He looked up at me then. His eyes were red, but not from tears. They were just tired. He said, "You were right. About Jessica. About that other man. About all of it. And I was too stupid, or too proud, or too scared to listen. I let her control everything. And I stood by while she hurt you." I finally sat down across from him. Not too close. Just close enough to look him in the eye. I asked, "And what now? What are you really here for?" He stopped talking for a long time. So long that I knew he didn't have a clear answer. Finally, he said, "I don't know. Maybe just to say I miss you. That I see it now. What I let happen. What I became." There was a quietness between us that was so thick I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Then I told him, "You didn't just let it happen, Michael. You chose it, over and over again. Every time you saw me being pushed aside and said nothing, you built a house where I was only welcome if I stayed out of the way. And now that it's gone, you want the pieces of me that are left." He didn't argue. He didn't try to defend himself. He just nodded slowly. He stood up to leave. But before he got to the door, he turned and said, "So that's it? You're turning your back on your own son." I stood up too. I walked over and held the door open. With my hand on the doorknob, I said, "Family isn't just blood, Michael. It's who opens the door for you when you're downstairs alone." Before he could answer, I closed it. I turned the lock, and I walked away without looking back. Because for once, I wasn't the one waiting for an invitation. I was the one deciding who deserved a seat at my table. As I sat back down with a fresh cup of tea, the quiet in my apartment didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like something I had earned. We don't get to choose the family we are born into, but we do get to choose who we let into our hearts and our lives. My story is a lesson in power and peace. It's about finding your voice, even when you think no one is listening. I found my power not by yelling or seeking revenge, but by calmly and deliberately making the choices that were right for me. I chose to build a new table, one filled with love and respect. And in doing so, I found a family that truly sees me. It is a powerful reminder that you are not invisible. You just need to stop waiting for people to notice you and start living a life so full that they can't help but see you shine.